The Buffalo Bills offense was elite in 2024. What new wrinkles could be in play for 2025? We're breaking that down today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of the Herd Mentality Substack, co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, co-host of the NFL First Read Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Well, folks, welcome in. Excited for our conversation today, and I say our because I have a guest today. It's Anthony Prohaska of Cover One, the outstanding host of the Disguise Coverage podcast, as well as the Cover One Film Room, one of my favorite people to talk football with. And last year, Anthony and I had a conversation about the possibilities for the direction of the Bills offense. And AP, man, you nailed a lot of that. And so I wanted to pick your brain and see what's on your mind for this year, what new wrinkles could be in play, where the passing game's going, where the running game is going. So as always, thanks for giving us some of your time.
No, thank you for having me. It's always a sincere honor and pleasure every time you ask me to come on and talk ball in a real way like we like to do here on the show. So I appreciate you having me. And yeah, I forgot that we did. I have so many things in my brain, and I've forgotten when we had that conversation here on the show last year. I forgot. I put so much work into that whole idea last year of condensed formations and personnel groupings and studying and picking from the Rams and Lions and different offenses that were working out of that. And yeah, some of it came to fruition, and maybe we'll nail some of that again in this one.
Well, that's so much of why I enjoy talking football with you in general, is not only do you study the Bills and their players and the coaches and the schemes, but you are dialed in on what's happening across the league, other influences, and you tie it all together in a great way. And I learn things when I talk to you, and I like to talk to people that, spark ideas in my own mind and can shed some wisdom. So I hope you can do that here today. And let's get into it, because like you've already kind of teased, I've teased before the season about this time, you discussed the idea of condensed formations, right? A lot of conversations about formational width and how that will be much more condensed. Talked a lot about bigger personnel groupings, and you nailed it. Those were significant pieces of the Bills' offensive identity in 2024. So with the ability to take this anywhere you want, what are some of the wrinkles maybe you're anticipating for this year? And look, there's not a lot of new on the offense. It's pretty much minus Mac Hollins and Amari Cooper, plus Elijah Moore and Josh Palmer, and let's go play football.
Yeah, that's a very fair point. So I'm going to start with, one that you and I are going to deep dive on a bit. I'm going to mention a quick one that I think is the most realistic. I think we could see more power and counter worked into this offense from a run scheme menu perspective. We kind of know what they like to get into from duo, mid-zone weak, and all the tackle pull stuff. But based on what they did last year down the stretch, mixing in and with some of the blast motion pieces and some of the extra offensive linemen, or the 6 offensive lineman sets, or jumbo, however you want to verbalize it, I think we could see some more traditional, power and counter looks out of different personnel groupings, different formations. But I think that could be added to the menu from an increased usage standpoint. The one that I really want to see, and I don't know, I got so excited when you had this on the docket because it's something I really truly believe in. But I don't know if at this point it's more hopeful, because I've been saying this for years and it hasn't come to fruition. But the idea of the Bills leaning into more pistol, I just think it makes so much sense for this offense, for Josh Allen. I did a full episode on why the pistol was good for the Bills last year leading into the playoffs, and tied into how it would unlock Josh Allen in the offense. I think it would do wonders. We can talk about that here, but the big one for me is pistol, and leaning into more of that as the next step or evolution in this offense and kind of taking things further.
All right, let's focus in on the run scheme later, okay? Because I want to get into that. You kind of talk about some more creative gap schemes, and I think there's a Ray Davis conversation to be had there, which I'm curious to get into with you. But Pistol kind of maybe has some momentum. I know there was some video that came out of some of the OTA practices where it appeared that the Bills were functioning with some pistol looks. And so, it's tinkering season during OTAs. Let's break this down on pistol, what it is and why perhaps you're hoping to see it implemented in this offense in 2025.
So I'm going to lead off with a quote from Sean McVay, Rams head coach, one of the best offensive minds in all of football. This is from an interview he did last offseason with Robert Mays of The Athletic. Tremendous interview. If you have not watched it, go back. They talk about, McVay talks about life, being a leader, managing culture, in addition to scheme and structure. It's tremendous. But, at this point last year, it was 2024, the Rams in 2023 had seen a significant uptick in pistol usage. And so McVay spoke about that, and he said, quote, "Pistol gave us the ability to activate different parts of our offense that maybe we would typically only run out of shotgun. And I thought there were some things about the run, the phasing, and the spacing of the run game that was very similar to being in the dot. There's some differences, but it's very similar timing. You can keep the landmarks for the way you're hitting blocks the same because the back is still starting in the same location. You can just present more pre-snap without losing part of your dot run game." End quote. Long story short, the pistol, it just does such a good job of marrying under center or I formation kind of run concepts and ideas for the running back, for offensive line, angles and blocking pieces for the offensive line, in addition to where giving the running back time, runway, track, all of that. But you also get the favorable shotgun elements for a quarterback while being in the pistol because of that alignment. It just allows you to work in more run game menu diversity because you're able to run through or add a defense in addition to kind of still being able to go around them. You can naturally work in more QB, more mobility or athleticism with, if your QB is a run threat, movements with bootlegs, RPOs. You can go play action with their quarterback turning their back or not having to turn their back to the defense, the read option elements. There's just so much meat, I think, on the bone formationally for pistol in general, but especially with a team like the Buffalo Bills who have a dual threat in Josh Allen. It makes too much schematic sense because of the marriage of the under center and shotgun elements of an offense, and then play action pieces, all the things that spurn from there. I also have some data on it that kind of furthers that, but it just makes too much schematic sense from a marriage perspective. But I've also said that for the past couple seasons, so I don't know what to say. I'm just going crazy.
So let's go there. You said it makes too much schematic sense. The Bills have the ideal quarterback to do pistol formations. Why hasn't it happened? What are some of the complicating factors to that?
And I wonder too, the first one that I'll say for me, I wonder if it's like a Josh Allen thing. Like, I wonder if maybe he's not as comfortable in that regard. I don't know if, because also he's a really good magician with the ball from a play action perspective, which is part of the reason why in season I kept waiting for an uptick in play action rate. They were only 27th in play action rate. That's what they finished the year at. They never really saw an uptick. And with how their run game was cooking, especially from under center, I kept waiting and thinking, okay, like here, this is where we start to lean into play action. We're struggling with certain elements of our passing game. Let's lean into that. And we never got that. And I wonder if it is a Josh Allen thing, if it's an aspect that they don't want to lean into, or he doesn't want to lean into. I also wonder, is it, aside from complications, they really haven't had to add much. Like if it's not broken, don't fix it, or kind of, the KISS model, keep it simple, stupid. And they haven't had to, we haven't had to bust this out. The regular diet that we're feeding everyone every week is winning. I mean, again, we're sitting here talking about or I guess I'm sitting here talking about this thing I really want to see. And they put up franchise numbers on offense last year and had the league MVP and all these accolades. And so it's like, well, maybe they don't need that. And maybe they don't need to add the complications of, changing some timing things or alignment things for Josh Allen, or potentially making him uncomfortable in a way if he does. Again, that's an if on my thought process there. But it is a question that I just kind of haven't understood. And maybe it's, maybe Connor McGovern isn't comfortable snapping at that depth or that feeling, even though it's similar to shotgun. Like, there's all those little intricacies that I wonder if it's tied more to feeling, and they're just like, we don't need to kind of mess up the waters a little bit.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's a timing element of unleashing that where
Yeah.
you wonder, like, okay, when's the moment? Do you break it out for the playoffs? Is it a midseason thing? Do you start the year and then just create this entire menu of problems?
And that's what I did with that episode last year. I did it leading into the playoffs because I was like, here's going to be the thing where they just whoop everyone with it. And I was left wanting.
Well, all right. I don't know how much it was on the offense that the Bills didn't go deeper in the playoffs.
Fair point.
So, well, we'll see how it all shakes out this year. I am curious about Pistol as well. All right, coming up here in just a moment, Anthony and I we're going to have a conversation focused more on the passing game and what has Anthony excited about the Bills' passing offense, maybe some of the concerns as well. So, folks, be sure to stick with us. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. I always like to log in there in the morning and see what profit boosts are available. And I'm also checking out a lot of these football futures bets. There's some ones that are pretty interesting to me. Right now, you can get the Bills at plus 360 to win the AFC. You can get the over-under on Josh Allen's passing yards at 3,775.5. Smash the over there. How about James Cook? You can get the over-under at 950.5 for his rushing yards. I think he's going to get 1,000 yards. If you do too, smash the over. And if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up because new customers can bet just $5, get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. So open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Joe Marino hosts the Locked On Bills, joined by Anthony Prohaska, the outstanding multiple podcast host for Cover One. Make sure you're following him on X at @pro__ant, and make sure you're checking out all of his work. You'll be a more informed fan of the Buffalo Bills if you do so. All right, let's talk passing offense here, Anthony, and I'll ask you a very basic question. We'll see where you take this. Again, we mentioned it. It's pretty much goodbye Mac Hollins and Amari Cooper. Hello, Josh Palmer and Elijah Moore. What excites you most about where this passing game can go in 2025?
We'll start with the Josh Palmer edition and a lot of these just high-level points. I think they have an opportunity with having Palmer on the team from the get-go, the opportunity to have someone who can win potentially in one-on-one situations on the outside, especially in the underneath and low intermediate. I have some other questions of his game and the offense in general, but I think that's a kind of initial starting point. I think Amari Cooper, even though he wasn't necessarily the prince that was promised, a lot of folks thought he was, I did think his presence and his skill set helped the offense breathe and open up a little bit when he was introduced. Palmer's skill set and presence, being there present from training camp, right from week one, I think that is a nice piece to have within this offense. But for me, it's really, what really excites me of the passing offense is last year and then building upon last year, their ability to find success in the passing game, despite the fact that they lacked separators and despite lacking much, if any, of a vertical presence. What excites me a lot is Allen building on last year, where he really started to he did this sparingly in previous years, but last year felt like he really started to take more of the profit consistently that defenses gave him, hitting those checkdowns, hitting the underneath routes, taking a 4 to 6 yard completion on first down to set up second and medium or second and short instead of pushing the ball downfield a little bit more. It felt like so much of the offense was easy because of Allen playing quarterback from the neck up, and MVP season. So obviously he was doing a lot of things well. And so much of that will be, the mutant alien unicorn stuff of him making throws a yard from the sideline, 25 yards downfield, and just the big time throws, needle in a haystack type moments. But for me, it was him really building on the foundation of playing quarterback from the neck up, taking the profit, that defenses were giving him. And starting to do that, just what do you do with this offense with how good the run game is? Allen just having his innate ability to be Josh Allen, but then also having like the Drew Brees moments where, okay, cool, I'm just going to check it down to my tight end. Okay, I'm just going to dump it down to the running back. Okay, 2nd and 5, here we go, first down. Okay, 2nd and 3. Oh, it's 2nd and 4. Let me take the 5-yard gain, and we're going to move the sticks. All those pieces. And that's also kind of one of the potential drawbacks from a pistol perspective, like we just talked about in the previous segment. Like it can make, you don't have that natural leverage that's created by having a running back necessarily hipped off someone in the shotgun. You can get a running back fast to the flat, kind of create, and Allen would take advantage of some of those things. So maybe that's a potential drawback in the pistol game. But for me, it really is just Allen's ascension playing the quarterback from the neck up last year and how that's the basis for the passing game. Before we've added anyone or anything, his ability to just find the open guys and be willing to take it is something we saw at another level last year.
Yeah, my go-to phrase on that is always, I love when Josh Allen just does a smart right thing with the football.
There you go.
And you take those profits, keep it on schedule, avoid, being behind the sticks. And when you're as dynamic as Josh Allen is, you're going to be really tough to beat if you are consistently doing the smart right thing with the football and not being in negative situations or putting your defense in a bad spot. And I thought that was a big part of overcoming a defense that struggled last year, that especially with defending the pass was a major problem. And obviously they took away the football, which mattered a ton, but Josh Allen's consistency, I thought, was the right formula, the right quarterback for that team. And so I'm curious to see what this year calls for. When you think about, there's a lot of conversation, Dalton Kincaid, Keon Coleman, and the kind of the next steps for those two guys as some premium investments in recent years. What's your temperature on their trajectory and your kind of expectations for 2025?
Start with Keon. I think last year was really kind of, and I'll kind of tie this in further. He was my wide receiver 9 coming out last year, but I thought he had arguably the most varied spectrum of possibilities in his career out of everyone. If you told me at the end of his career he was a strong wide receiver 2, I could buy it. If you told me that he was out of the league after his rookie year, I could buy it. If you told me he was that receiver that everybody kept giving 1-year deals to because they felt they were the one that could finally unlock him and tap into his skill set, I could believe it. I think he showed some potential with the ability to dunk on some guys, also showed why living as a contested catch guy is hard in the NFL, because it's hard to win that way when corners are equally as big or as strong or as fast or more technical than you, and he's lacking in technique. And also pushing him into that role, as the Bills did, made sense to kind of bring him along slowly, but it also kind of pigeonholed him from an expectation standpoint from the defense, maybe kind of tipped their hand a little bit. I largely was encouraged by his performance, and it really just because it was the expectations I had. I didn't expect him to be some route running savant by the end of the year. A lot of what he needs is going to take time. We're not going to see the real payoff of Keon Coleman until potentially end of this year, beginning of next, like years 2 through 4, or year 3 is the sweet spot. This is the guy who was still playing basketball at Michigan State. You know all these deals. Like, he hasn't been a full-time football player very long. The offense that he came from at Florida State, so on and so forth. But I was encouraged by some of the athleticism playing and the strength and the size played, and I was encouraged. I think he does need to take a step, and it's unfortunate that he got the injury, because he needs, one of your great phrases that I love, he needed more time on task, and that injury took that away from him. But I'm encouraged for what he can be this upcoming year. Dalton Kincaid is one. I thought he was going to be the tip of the spear for the passing offense last year. I think he still can be that. I know he got the injury, the lower body injury, and then the shoulder or clavicle injury that he had earlier in the year that he was playing through when Allen kind of overthrew him on a ball. I think it's Houston, and he went out for it and hurt his shoulder whenever that came down. And then the disconnect just between the two of them a lot. Sometimes it's on Allen, sometimes it's on Kincaid. I still think he can be a mismatch creator on this offense. But I do think his value, and you and I talked about this with him as a rookie, his value is significantly tied to how much he can progress as a blocker. I do think his overall value is somewhat capped if he can't be a functional inline blocker, which he really is not at this point. He's more of the F more of the move, the adjuster guy or the split out wide guy. You're not really putting him in line. And if you are, you're at somewhat of a disadvantage. So I think you're limited a bit from a menu standpoint with him, but people writing him off, no way. He's still got that potential. We saw flashes of it. A healthy Dalton Kincaid, I think, can do some things.
All right. I want to ask Anthony about what he's concerned about with the passing offense and have a conversation on the rushing offense. So we'll do that here on the other side of it, folks. Be sure to stick with us. My guest today, Anthony Prohaska from Cover One. We're talking about the Bills offense, the direction of the Bills offense. And one carryover question I had from the previous segment about the passing offense was, what are some of the concerns that you might have about the makeup of this roster as it relates to the passing offense and, maybe what's missing?
So one general one, and I think they've solved it a bit. We talked about the addition of Josh Palmer. We'll see what Keon Coleman can be. We'll see what Elijah Moore potentially could be. We know what Khalil Shakir is in a good way, but if they cannot consistently win outside and vertical, I think that's a chain reaction in a negative way that can snowball for this offense. If defenses can just say, you know what, we're going to crowd the box and gap out against the run because we don't think you have guys that can beat us on the outside, I think that eventually can present a problem. So that's one high-level thing that I'm concerned about. The more specific one that is somewhat tied to that, the deep ball, which was not very prevalent for the Bills last year in 2024. So Josh Allen last year on deep throws of 20 or more air yards, regular season numbers only, out of 35 qualifying quarterbacks, 66 attempts, which was the second most. EPA per drop back, he was 21st. Overall EPA, he was 16th. Completion rate over expected, it was at a negative 1.4, which was 23rd. And his rating was a 69.6, which was 29th. When you go back and you watch the Bills' deep game, it was really a lack of success, I should say, and it was due to a multitude of things. Inaccuracy from Josh Allen, which was weird. Him getting back to the mechanics and being so clean in a lot of ways regularly last year. We saw him being more of a rotational athlete, throwing through the ball, biting the burger with the shoulder tuck, but that just didn't translate to the deep ball. You saw inaccuracy from him deep, poor timing with various targets, especially Dalton Kincaid, guys not being on the same page, and then a lack of separation for a lot of guys deep. When it did work, the deep ball, it was often off of extended plays or off script plays from Allen, him being a mutant in a variety of ways. The throw to Ty Johnson in week 2 against Miami, the one to Shakir against Baltimore, or think of, all the back shoulder throws that worked for Keon Coleman, the 2 against Baltimore, the 1 against Arizona. Also think of the ones that didn't work for Keon Coleman, the 1 against the Jets in New York, though also the other one against Baltimore. It just seemed like things were very tight downfield. Allen wasn't sharp downfield. There wasn't a ton of separation, and it felt like there was a cap on this offense, which ended up not being too much of an issue because Allen was so efficient underneath and the run game was dominant. But I think that's still an area of concern going into this year just because of how poor they were last year and even somewhat the year before, where Allen had Diggs a lot and he was just unable to find him vertically. It's an area that I think is concerning.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how that builds from last year. It's one thing to be below average throwing the ball deep, but don't be second in attempts.
Right?
You don't do it so much if it's so ineffective. And
that was the weird thing. Like, they were hitting it so much, but also not hitting it. So I just didn't. Yeah, it's a weird vibe.
I thought a lot of that had to do with, the hardest part of developing chemistry is probably vertical stuff. And we all know Khalil Shakir was the only returning receiver, and he's not a vertical guy, right? His low average depth of target, and that's a lot to work in. And the MVS thing obviously lasted a couple of games.
Yeah.
I agree. And that I think generally I'm picking up from you that we recognize that the Bills offense, the passing offense in particular, was good. It was a very good passing offense, top 3 in EPA per dropback. But there's levels for it to become more dynamic and more explosive. And that's definitely what I'm hopeful to see this year. And it sounds like you too. And I think Palmer and Moore helps, but it's maybe even more chemistry involved with some of the younger players and maybe some schematic layers. But I think it's going to be really good. I just hope it's also explosive, because if this passing game is explosive to the ways that it can be with Josh Allen as the quarterback, and you do take a step on defense, like the Bills are going to be as tough of an out as you can get. But I think a lot of that's tied to how dangerous you can be throwing the ball, and hopefully there's a big jump this year.
Yeah, 1000%. It's all trying to be as diverse as you can in your attack plan on offense. And they've grown pretty diverse over the years and where they are now, with Allen being the thrower that he is, the run game being as diverse as it is. And just that alone is pretty good. And then now Allen being able to beat you underneath and in the intermediate. If you can unlock that deep part, in addition to how they've had some yards after catch success last year, which they finally incorporated. Now, if you can add the shot play or the explosive chunk play on top of what they already have, just how or where do you defend this offense if they can hit you in the mouth or cut your head off at any moment, anywhere all over the field?
Bills are good throwing it. They're good running it, and they ran the ball a lot. Fifth highest percentage of offensive plays that were runs. Top 3 in EPA per run. Really good running into heavy boxes. Good running into light boxes. 32 rushing touchdowns. That's crazy. It was a really good year running the football. And I say all that to say that the top 9 offensive linemen are back. All 3 running backs are back. The quarterback's back. The all coaching staff is back. I mean, talk about an opportunity to build on some success. That's exactly what's here for the Bills. What excites you outside of continuity for a scheme and operation that was really good last year?
So that first point for me, I won't hit on it too much. It is the continuity, like bringing back that offensive line with Cromer. Like your top 6 offensive linemen are all back, which
top
all matters.
Top 9.
Fair, a good point. And then that tying into what really excites me is just all the diversity, like having 3 main concepts they can hit. I mentioned them earlier: mid-zone weak, duo, and then the tackle pull stuff. So really it's like 4 concepts, because you have dart and then you have tackle long trap. So it's really like 4 main concepts. And then like I alluded to, they started to work in some power and some counter down the stretch. They're sending Alec Anderson in blast motion, which is phenomenal. Like, give me more of that. And they can run these concepts from a variety of alignments, variety of formations. They can run the ball from spread or condensed looks. They have multiple effective running backs led by a very effective James Cook last year, who can make their offense right even when they're wrong. And then the personnel groupings and the diversity that they have within that as well. There's just so much diversity from a personnel standpoint and alignment standpoint, formationally, conceptually. Also, what really excites me from a new standpoint, I think he's going to make the team. I like the idea of, I've talked about this a bunch, give me 13 personnel, actually not even 13 personnel, give me 3 tight ends on the field, and then give me 6 offensive linemen, and give me Dalton Kincaid split out wide as the quads IX, and I've got my offensive linemen, and I've got Knox, and I've got Jackson Hawes, and I've got Alec Anderson. Attach the formation in some way. I don't care who's in line. I don't care who's hipped off, and we can run through your face at every way, shape, and form. Yeah. Or maybe we have a nice one-on-one matchup outside with Dalton Kincaid, and we can let him win a little bit. I think there's more layers to be added with a couple more, with some sprinkling in of some more concepts, traditional concepts like power and counter, dressing it up a little bit as well. But also I think the addition of Hawes could make a difference in the run game and just with their athleticism as well. It's just such a fun run game. They're all, like, they don't have to change anything and they will be successful. And if they add a couple tweaks, man, just a juggernaut there.
Yeah, I think the Bills would be comfortable living in those big people sets. I think they're comfortable saying, we're going to run the ball. We don't care if you know that. Our people are going to move your guys out of the way, and we're going to be productive. And the Bills did that quite a bit. All right. I think I read between the lines a little bit when you started talking about some run game wrinkles, and you got into different gap schemes, more dynamic gap schemes. And I can't help but wonder how much of that was influenced by Ray Davis and stylistically the type of runner that he is. I watched Bills game film all season long, but now that the season's been over, I've went back and watched a lot of it, but not necessarily watching games. I'm watching players. And so one thing that I recently did is I went back and I watched all of Ray Davis's touches. And something I'm 98% sure that you and I had this conversation at least a couple of times last year after the Bills drafted Ray Davis. And I think we both agreed that he's not as good of a zone runner, right? Mm-hmm. He's just a better gap runner. And his best year was his last year at Kentucky. And I think he was almost 70% gap runs versus zone runs. And I thought last year with the Bills, I thought his best runs were more gap oriented, where zone it felt like it lacked artistry, to be honest with you. And in contrasting him to James Cook, who I think is an exceptional zone runner, and the way that he's developed feel for like the cutback game within zone is really, really special. And so in one hand, it's not helpful to Ray Davis for me to watch James Cook run the zone schemes and then watch Ray Davis. But I feel like there's just a need for growth there. And I think it can happen. I think James Cook is a great example of a guy who can develop as a zone runner, which I think he has absolutely done in 3 years. But I foil that against me recollecting you having similar concerns about Ray Davis as a zone runner. Now you're talking about some more dynamic gap schemes. Am I right in assuming a lot of that is to maximize Ray Davis?
I think that could be part of it, 1,000%, especially if they feel they want to incorporate him more into this offense with visions of the future, even more so than just kind of visions of the now. He does fit. And, this maybe is unfair to James Cook because I thought Cook took a step up in his physicality last year. He's never going to be this big yards after contact guy, but he was running through shoulders. He was falling forward. He was pushing the pile. He looked like he was a little thicker. He added a physical element while maintaining the juice and speed that he had. So he is a fit for their gap stuff, their zone stuff, all of that. But Davis's yards after contact ability, the way he's built, the lower center of gravity, the ability to break tackles and run through people, he's such a fit if they just want to get downhill and punish teams with regularity. And yeah, with those quick hitting, whether it's from shotgun, pistol, under center, but especially from the shotgun piece, he tends to go, the lack of artistry is a really good way to put it. Like, if the run is supposed to go to the B gap, he's going to go to the B gap. Like, he's not going to, let me set this guy up and I can maybe cut this back and move here. He's see hole, hit hole. Part of it too, probably being like, man, I can meet that linebacker in the hole and fall through him for 2 or 3 yards and we'll net some positivity. He is very good at being like, let's just hit this right off rip, right off the bat, get downhill instead of sideline to sideline. So I think that is a fair point. And if they want to move in that direction, do we see him incorporated more into this offense right from the jump, knowing what his skill set is, knowing where he succeeds the most, and maybe bring him along in more of the zone base, or maybe that gives him more confidence to operate with some more artistry. I think that's a really good thought.
All right. So much to love about the possibilities with the Bills rushing offense. Outside of injuries, like, what concerns can you muster up for any roadblocks that might happen this year with the Bills running the ball?
I am concerned about who fills the Mac Hollins role as a blocker. Having your
does anybody? The guy played over 100 snaps of inline tight end for the Bills last year. I am. Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but I am curious to see that. But is that even something you try to replace?
No, but like, how do they? What's the money ball line? Like, how do they replace it in the aggregate? Like, is it more snaps from a tight end? Like, is it Keon Coleman stepping up and fitting into that more? Or is it a bit of a change schematically? And I think that's part of where, like, essentially, how do they mitigate that? Because to your point, how do you replace that? Like, the answer is you really don't.
Right. It's like when the Bills lost Lorenzo Alexander. Like, they're just not going to have that.
No. So what do they do differently accordingly? Like, right. How do they lean into different types of formations? Do we see a little more spread? Is it less duo? Do we change the motion packages off the mid zone, tying that into duo? One of the big strengths that they had is they would run that tight 3-by-1 look, and they could run duo out of it, or they could send somebody in jet motion across and then run mid-zone weak right off rip. And defenses had to account for both of it because it looked the same personnel-wise and formationally. So I am concerned how they mitigate that loss from a personnel standpoint, but also schematically, formationally, alignment-wise, however you want to label it. And then I am concerned, I mentioned this a bit earlier, not leaning into like the marrying the run and the pass enough to really put your foot on teams' throats and absolutely destroy them. So this is a little run game setup that leads into the pass for me. I just still find being 27th in play action rate last year feels criminal. It feels so criminal considering how good the run game was. I felt like they could have, so this isn't really being concerned about the run game, but it's tied into it. Like, I just feel like their play action game could have taken advantage more, or they left some potential meat on the bone given how good the run game was. Again, this is a nitpick because their run game was awesome. Their pass game was awesome. They had the MVP, all that, like we said, but they were 4th in EPA per pass on play action last year with almost a full yard more of average target separation. So just why not lean into it further? And that makes me worry about marriage of the run in the pass, leaning into the right concepts at the right time. But largely it's hard to be too concerned. Really, as long as Joe Brady's pressing the right buttons at the right time, which I guess you could be concerned about. Does he somehow regress in that way? I really do think this run game is, I'm not going to say what I was about to say because I feel like I'm too superstitious. I was going to jinx it. It's going to be hard to stop the Bills run game.
Let's close on a quick talk about play action, because I've ranted about this a lot myself. Josh Allen is always great at play action, and for him to not be towards the top of the league in frequency bothers me, and he's towards the bottom of the league in frequency. What do you think it is? I've had some theories, including the way the Bills pass pro. I think they want to use a lot of 5-man protections. They don't give a lot of help. I think the Bills kept their running back into pass block on less than 9% of passing snaps. They don't really keep tight ends. The tackles don't get a lot of help. And so when you're going to run play action, I think maybe you do need to be willing to block with 6 or 7, and the Bills don't want to. And then you're turning your Josh Allen's back to the defense when maybe he doesn't have the same level of confidence in these skill players. Because I went back and I looked, when the Bills ran play action in the past, the targets went to Diggs and Davis. And of course they would, because those were the top 2 receivers, but it was very skewed. And so I wondered about just that swap and how that impacted things. But come on, Joe Brady. Let's run the play action like 30% of the time. I think should be what they are aiming for. What are your thoughts on maybe why they didn't do it as much as we both think they should?
It started for me with the Allen piece, maybe not turn, especially from an under center perspective, maybe not turning his back to the defense. One, maybe he's not comfortable doing it and then having faith in the weapons getting downfield like you talked about, or with how much changing the pre to post snap picture matters for defenses. Now, I can understand quarterbacks in general just not wanting to do that, being like, okay, I think it's this coverage. I turn my back and I have no idea what happened to the safeties, what's going on right now, and having to process all that. I think the protection piece is a great call out because they like to get as many into the route distribution as they can. They try to max out. And for those who don't know, the max you can get is 5 because you've got 11 on the field. You got your 5 offensive linemen plus the quarterback. That leaves 5 potential eligibles. They like to do that. Even if it's the running back releasing late, the most they like to do really is give some chip help, like some delayed chip from the tight end, but then they release into the flat right away or a little over the ball route. They like to get that out there. So maybe it's Joe Brady feeling like he isn't able to maximize his eligibles if they go true play action. I think it's a bit of all those things, or maybe it's something underlying internally that we don't know, because it just makes too much sense. I look at a team like the Lions, who in a lot of ways I thought the Bills would emulate last year from a personnel usage standpoint. To a degree, the Lions have some unicorn guys over there in a really cool way, but from a condensed perspective and reduced formational width to the run game script they hit to the play action, like you look what the Lions did, they mashed you so they could kill you with the pass. It's natural. We hear this going back to being kids watching football on TV. Like, you run the ball and set up the pass, that play action game. Oh my goodness. You hear the announcers talk about it all the time. And you don't have to have a great run game to have a good play action game. I want to say that before somebody yells it in the comments. But when you have a great run game, it just feels like an absolute alley-oop or a layup to just have a dominant play action game attached to it, especially if you're struggling to push the ball vertical. It can be a way to create some shots and get some one-on-ones and create some chunk plays when you're sucking in that defense, which you will because they're scared of your run game. So it's got to be something from a comfortability standpoint with Allen, or something that Brady just personally doesn't like. And I think the eligibles tying into the pass pro, or Allen's overall comfortability with the weapons or the changing of the picture, they've got to be the top, suspects there for why they're not doing it.
Well, I've said a few times, and I'll say it again, I think the Bills' 2024 offense has a heck of an argument, that it was the best in Buffalo Bills history. They scored the most touchdowns, and Josh Allen was unbelievable. And I think where I get excited is for some of these common sense things that can evolve and improve to make an elite offense even more elite. And so I think there's plenty of opportunity. I love the continuity top to bottom, whether it's personnel or coaching offensively. And again, continuity for continuity's sake is not necessarily a good thing, but when it was very successful, it's good to bring a lot of it back. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity for this Bills offense. I like the youth at receiver. They got younger, right? You go from Hollins and Cooper, who are 32 and 31, to Moore and Palmer, who are 25 and 26. I think they can be better separators, which is a big need for what this Bills offense needs. So I know that we got into a lot of different things, a lot of encouraging things in some areas that it can improve. But I hope that regardless of what you thought coming in this conversation, that you leave encouraged by where this offense can go in 2025.
Yeah, it's hard to not be encouraged. You've got the returning MVP. You have a returning starting 5 offensive line that is tremendous. You have one of the best offensive line coaches in all of football. You've got good depth on your offensive line. You've got 3 running backs that fit your offense well in a variety of ways. And you've tried to upgrade some potential roles in the wide receiver room that if it works, cool. If not, the fallback plan is still kind of like, all right, let's just run the ball down everyone's throats, and then we'll let Josh Allen do Josh Allen things. And that happened more often than not last year than people realize. So that's a pretty good fallback plan to have. It's hard to not be encouraged.
Well, AP, thanks for stopping by. Always enjoy our conversations, and this is another good one. So thanks for giving us some of your time, and thanks to everyone who tuned in. Make sure you're checking out Anthony's work, Cover One, Disguise Coverage, and the Film Room as well. Can't miss stuff. The Film Room episodes with the players that you guys have had on this offseason are exceptional. I reference them all the time in what I'm doing, because not only do you get some unbelievable looks into certain plays and then breaking it down, but I mean, you guys will ask some very direct questions, and like what you're able to pull out of Connor McGovern about some of those contract conversations has been phenomenal. So folks, don't miss any of the content that Anthony and the crew over at Cover One are putting out to you. You will be a smarter Buffalo Bills fan for sure. All right, everybody, thanks for being here. As always, I kindly ask that you share, subscribe, rate, and review. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills, and I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.